Hello and welcome back to another episode of Legal Unicorns. This is the podcast where we talk to leading legal voices across the African continent, and I'm incredibly excited for today's guest, who I will introduce to you in a moment. But suffice to say, thanks to all the listeners and subscribers to the Legal Unicorns podcast. We have been growing and growing and growing. Last year was an exceptionally good year. Over 100,000 downloads in the last 6 months across YouTube, thousands and thousands of downloads across the podcasting platforms, and it's really motoring. So a big thank you to the audience, and a big thank you to the guests, because obviously what we're trying to do is shine a light on the professionals in the legal market across the African continent that are doing things slightly different and are coming onto the podcast to educate myself and our listeners as well about what's going on in different parts of Africa. So today I am absolutely delighted to welcome John Chibueze. I hope I've pronounced your name right, John. You'll have to forgive me from my English pronunciation.
You're welcome, Rob. That's fine. You got a good pronunciation. That's totally fine.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Rob. Happy to be here.
John joins us from Lagos today, correct, in Nigeria?
Yes, Lagos, Nigeria, yeah.
Brilliant, John. Now, John is, this is one of the reasons why we're so delighted to have John on the podcast. He is an internationally recognized senior energy and infrastructure finance lawyer with over 20 years of experience across the world. He's also a C-suite executive who's led in-house departments and held board seats where he's provided legal and management level advisory work and advice to Fortune 500 companies. He has an exceptionally broad range of commercial and infrastructure finance and energy transaction experience, which, as we all know, is a massively growing area across the African continent. He was previously a partner at the global leading law firm that everybody knows, at Dentons, and I believe Dentons ACAS in Nigeria, where he led the team and teams on many of the largest multi-billion-dollar infrastructure and project finance work and projects across the country. He's also a director of a Fortune 500 downstream oil company and was previously a general manager of an international upstream company where he advised the company on its regional and international upstream asset business, and of course its financial and commercial transactions. John is an exceptionally well-respected lawyer across the continent, and thank you for joining us today, John.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Well, look, we'll crack straight into it. We obviously, I'll be conscious we've got a little bit of a delay, a second or two of delay on the on our Wi-Fi's here in South Africa and in Nigeria, but we'll persevere. Obviously,
that's fine.
The purpose of the podcast is really to find out as much about you as we can, because the listeners and the feedback that we have is mainly from perhaps a younger generation to ourselves who've had 20 plus years experience, who are looking at leaders like yourself and looking at how you did it or how you're doing it, and take inspiration from that. So, and that's most of the feedback that we get. So if I may if we can take the listeners on a bit of a journey of where you are from, where you grew up, and how you got to this point, if you.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Okay, it's long story short. My name is John Chibueze. I wasn't born John Chibueze. I changed my name to Chibueze in 2015. My original name was John Ukpaka. If you go to my history, you find out my first employment was at a firm called Templars, one of the largest firms here in Nigeria. I was in corporate commercial department. I was there for 4 years, from 03 to 07. Then I went to Acres Law, now Dentons, from 07 to 2018. Then I went in-house. I had done at this point, about 16 years of practice. I felt I'd done it all. I'd done all the deals. I'd done all the local, all the international, all the global. And there was truly, I didn't leave. I didn't leave the practice to chase a bigger paycheck. I left practice because there was nothing left to do in practice for me, someone like me then. And I had a very high mileage of transactions when I was in practice. So my CV was probably twice as long as any other person's CV, or unless you were practicing at that level in my time. So you could easily maximize. I remember my first interview at Acres Law then, when I gave my then interviewer, who became my boss, my CV. She didn't believe it was my CV because I was just 4 years at the bar. So the CV was so long. So she says to me, "Listen, her name is Kemi Shagun. She was an erstwhile managing partner at Denton's. So she gets me and tells me, listen, this CV, I don't think it's yours. Just tell me which deals here are yours. Then we can talk about those deals that are yours." So I said to her, okay, fine, pick any deal and let's discuss. Then we went into it for like an hour. She was satisfied that this is actually this guy's CV. That was 4 years at the bar. So you can imagine 4 multiplied by another 12 at Denton's. So my CV was ridiculous when I left. So I felt that I had done it all in practice and I wanted more challenge. At the time, it was 2018, I had the option of either moving abroad to to a more international environment, or staying here with a company that had an international outlook. So, but because I thought I'd done all the deals in Nigeria, I wanted to do more. I wanted to either, some of my colleagues had emigrated to English law firms and they had grown to partnerships there. They were doing more than bigger deals than we were doing here, or more, not bigger, not necessarily bigger, but global deals than we're doing here in Nigeria. Or I could take another path to in-house where I could do more in a more business environment. Now, let me pause here and say that in my younger days when I was in school, I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an investment banker. I wanted to be an economist. I wanted to do some investment banking or economy. In fact, I was going to do law as a second degree in economics first. I remember back then, but I don't remember what changed my mind. Yes, I read a book a book called The Firm. I think it was John Gresham's The Firm, and I loved John Gresham's The Firm, and I loved everything about the book. So I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be Mitch. Mitch is the character in the book. So I changed my career path on that novel, based on that novel, and I went into law school instead of. Okay, so that book was a pivot, which is really ridiculous because I had all the economics. I had gotten a degree. I got an award in economics in high school, which is supposed to be my path at the time. So I thought that okay, I done very well in economics. I was going to pursue it in long term. Then I read this book. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So I then changed my university degree to law, and then here I am. So when I left practice, I say this to bring back to this 2018 scenario where I left practice and I was tired of law. I think at that point, I think I had seen it all. I'd done it all in terms of my environment, how much as I could do in the environment where I was. So I thought it's either I go to a larger platform, or I move into a business environment, properly so called. So at that time, I had both options available. Then I remember the reason why I picked the local option was because I had just had a baby. My second daughter was 1 year old, and the opportunity I found abroad wasn't willing to sponsor my family in the first year, only in the second year. So I had to leave them behind and then travel for a year and then bring them over later. So because they wanted to confirm your employment and all, the process took about a year before they could sponsor family. Then I had my baby, my daughter was 2 years old then. So I'm really close to my kids. I really like the daddy thing. So then the opportunity here was local. It was here in Nigeria, but it's an international company, an oil company called Am International Petroleum Development Company Limited. They had offices in Lagos, Ghana, Houston, London. So there was also an indigenously owned international oil company, right? So I was okay. I figured I'd take this one here instead of taking that one there because I had the opportunity to stay with my kids or my family together. So while at Amni, right, my role kind of expanded beyond just legal because the way anybody oil and gas knows that oil companies are at their core project management companies, really, because the value chain of an oil company from exploration, production, financing, export, offtake is mostly a cycle of different transactions and projects in the same value chain. So you're basically overseeing multiple transactions at once, projects at once. So while I was there, I mean, I was able to kind of diversify my role because I wasn't just playing. I was better in the project team per se. So there was always operations, finance, um, 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 customer, contractor engagement. So it wasn't, maybe half of my job wasn't really legal. Half of my job was working with the project team on projects. So then I began to think out of the box, legally speaking, and then to do other things that were not legal. So when, in about three or 4 years towards after I joined Amni, I started thinking of getting an MBA. So I looked out, but I didn't have the time for full-blown 18 months or 12 months out of the environment MBA. So I took up an executive MBA with London School of Economics. Now, this is tell you that I've totally lost interest in strictly legal construct. I wanted to be I felt I could do more because I was doing more. In some meetings then, I'd come into a meeting with my team and you couldn't tell I was a lawyer unless I quoted something that was legal, because I was speaking from a business perspective on everything I was saying. Yes, it was legal issues, but there were also commercial. There's always the commercial shadow to any legal issue, and I was speaking more from the commercial side of things. So, come a time, I remember those days I'll go for meetings with my team, and unless maybe because I wore a suit, that's how you know I was a lawyer in the room. Because the other guys, engineers, typically dress like engineers, right? So that gave me the confidence that I could do more than law. I could actually, and then yes, I remember secondly, in that time frame, I wasn't getting opportunities for general counsel in other places. I was getting opportunities for COO in other companies, which is weird because if you look at my profile on LinkedIn, right, you think, so that told me that my outlook, my perception wasn't even legal anymore. It was actually veering away from the legal. It was still legal, but I got 2 COO opportunities that I passed up for different reasons. One was an indigenous oil and gas company here in Nigeria. Second was, they both, one was an international a Nigerian subsidiary of an international company. But they were both, and they thought, and when I was talking to the guys on those sides of the table, they told me, listen, you can do this. From every time I would say to them, I'm a lawyer, and they're like, everything you've said in this interview tells us you can do this. So I kept thinking, this was before my MBA. I think in my head that I think maybe like need to arm with something else, maybe an MBA or something that would give me the confidence that I can actually do a non-legal role perfectly. So I went ahead and did the MBA, and then it was 2022, about 2 years ago. So then I started thinking about going into leaving employment and going into it for myself. What I remember then, my family wanted to relocate to Canada then, and I wanted a more flexible working structure. I couldn't do that from a 9 to 5. Because Canada is about 8 or so hours behind Lagos time, or 8-7 behind London time. And most of my work was Lagos or London because my clientele were based in the area. So I thought to myself, I can't do this from a 9 to 5. And secondly, while I was at Amni and working at all those value chains, I began to see firsthand that there's a difference between earning a good salary, fantastic salary as it were, and actually managing your own time and costs for yourself. I remember I kept thinking to myself, wow, I'm being paid this amount of money. No, it wasn't bad, it was a very good amount of money then. But if I was in a law firm and you brought this to me, I would charge this much. And I'll charge this much for each of these things. But here I am sitting down providing this much money for all this work. Versus if I was charging my time for all this work in a consistency. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't help feeling that I could never be paid enough to sit down and do all this work for this much money. Even if you kept increasing that much money, right? Because again, I know how billable times work. I've done it for a long time. So I remember I used to amuse myself how much this would have cost the company if they brought it to my desk, one of the partner dentists, versus how much I'm paying the salary. Yeah. So I knew that I thought to myself I can probably expand my earning capacity if I went to myself. Of course, there's a risk attached to it, which is where consultancy and employment varies, right? Because employment gives you that confidence of a salary. You have all these packages, the allowances, the health, Consultancy is that you eat what you kill. So obviously your business development has to be on point. You have to have strong business development capabilities. You have to be able to originate. You have to be able to. Now, this was one of the things why they drummed in us when we were in practice. Because in practice, you always, especially at partner level, origination becomes your core deliverable. Not necessarily transaction oversight is something you can do, but you're meant to originate and pass it to senior associate to run with a team. So I've done all this for a while. So coming to now, when I was 20, post-COVID, COVID happened 2019, 2020. Post-COVID, we all had to rethink there was a shutdown, obviously, for everybody was at home, wherever in the world they were. So everybody had to, I think COVID gave impetus to a lot of people's career decision long term. But when you sat at home for a few months, you begin to think about how you thought your life couldn't go on if you weren't rushing out to the office by 8 o'clock in the morning. You begin to think, hang on, I can actually do this from my home regularly or from my home office, because a lot of us set up home office when we're in practice, but a lot of people didn't have that because until COVID happened, then force them to, begin to work from home and have a dedicated home space for working. I had that decades ago, so I was already set up in that environment. So I kept thinking to myself, hang on, I don't actually have to have a 9 to 5 to do what I do. I'm sure most environments had to realize that the work culture or working environment had shifted, and you couldn't return it. After people came back to work, it wasn't the same anymore. There was a paradigm shift in their thinking, how they could work with flexibility. So I wasn't the same anymore, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought I loved spending time with my kids that period. It made us much closer than it would have been if I was very busy, off in the morning, back at night, kind of lawyer. So I kind of liked that to continue. And when we go back to the office post-COVID, the only thing that I would have stayed in employment if the office culture had adapted to the post-COVID mentality. I saw a report from PwC in London saying that they had to then change the office hours for most office environments from 2 days in, 3 days off, or something like that, just because people were already fixated on how they liked being at home more than they thought they did. So a lot of my colleagues, and I go to UK firms and they tell me, oh, I only work 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week in the office. But that didn't happen where I was working. So and that was one of the post-COVID culture shock that happened to me that I didn't recover from. I wanted to be able to do what I was doing flexibly, because I felt like I could deliver the same amount of efficiency without having to be stationary in one office. I could travel and do what I was doing. That was one of the things that started fueling my desire. And secondly, I felt I could do more than just legal work. I wanted to do more than legal work. I wanted to do other things in a more definite path. So when I left, right, the first transaction I did wasn't even a legal brief. It was and it wasn't a Nigerian brief. It was a brief in Niger. I had this client that was thinking of acquiring an asset in Niger. So they wanted an in-country investment report, which is an amalgam of your legal risk, commercial, tax, legal systems, commercial environments, doing business, ease of doing business, and things like that. This kind of thing is typically outsourced to a KPMG, all right? But because I had done something similar while I was at Amni, when we're going to and what we're exploring for assets around Africa and around the world, so it was similar kind of bulk work. So it was easy to deliver that project to the client. It wasn't easy because it was tedious. A few tedious months. It was hard, and then you learn to assemble a team. You have to have a security team, and you have to have economics. You have to have journalists. You have to have tax consultants. You have to have all these teams doing different layers of work, and then you have to be the center to converge this information and produce an intelligent report as if you're reporting to a board. Now, bear in mind, I've done a legal role, I've done a partner role, I've done a board role. So I know what the board is looking for when they want to do investments in the country. I haven't a clear idea what the executives are thinking about, how they want to see that document come forth. So that work took about 3 months, and it was a fantastic report, well received by the clients. And they were so happy. I think I got a bonus or something on that work. So, this is the first time I said it. So I said to myself, like, legal actually is a pedestal. The legal platform is a pedestal. You can launch from that platform to any. We have people in this country who are CEOs of oil and gas companies, CEOs of banks, who were practicing lawyers once upon a time. Some of the biggest banks here, Access Bank, for instance, I think the CEO, if I'm not mistaken, is a lawyer. Orlando, the CEO is a lawyer. Oh, these are people who have practiced law in their lifetime. So the legal platform is a fantastic pedestal to launch into literally anything you want to do. It's one of the most fluid professions. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the dentist couldn't be a banker. I'm sure there are people who had dentistry in school who are bankers now. But I think that when you're working as a lawyer and you've gone through your line of career development, you have a very 360 view of most things, projects, transactions, investment. Then you typically gravitate to where your personal interest is. In my case, like I said to you, I wanted to be an economist from the beginning. I wasn't trying to be a lawyer. I was doing so I've always had the personal interest in excuse me, investments, financing, building project transactions, building deal. So that has always been my core. The fact that I became a lawyer was just a means to an end, really. Because when like I said, at the height of my career, I still gravitated back to finance world where I wanted to belong. I was doing more investment transactions. I always thought of myself as the client who wanted to get what I would give to the client. So I'm an investor so a client wants to invest XYZ $1 billion in XYZ project. So you play it back. I want to invest XYZ $1 billion in this project. So what do I need to do? What do I need to have? What kind of permission do I need to have available? I want to take an FID. I'm controlling a company that I need to report to my shareholders. So when you reverse engineer your briefs that way, you begin to have you begin to give the client what the client wants to get without having to throw in all the legal garbage that they don't need. Because at the height of your practice, right, you begin to filter. If you give a junior lawyer a brief, I need to do this and that, they fill it up with legal things, right? When it gets to his senior associate, he or she extracts what the client wants to know and puts all the other things. If it gets to like a general counsel or COO, they filter it even more because they want to give the client what they need to make a decision. So that mindset drove my ability to wander off the law path into investments, projects. I've done business plans because I've been in environments where I was very close to a value chain, in the value chain of a particular, I think it was a mining project in Nigeria. So I worked so closely with the client in setting up the company, reviewing their project management contracts, following up with their financing. So I didn't know that I could drop a plan for the business, even though bear in mind I was just a lawyer to this client. But because I had such an oversight, 360 overview of their business, I could write a report on the business as if I was a business analyst or something. So law is fun. It's fun. It's something you can do. It's like clay. You can mold yourself into anything with legal practice. So I've had a very lovely 21 year this year run in practice, and I'm still loving it. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that's brilliant, John.
I know I said long story short, but that wasn't very short.
No. It's a brilliant introduction to you and to where you're thinking, and I think there's so much in that I can extract and move as we move through the interview as well. I think that certainly the listeners can take out of that. I think there's a few things that you touched on there that I'll just reiterate. Firstly, interesting that you put about the book, The Firm, that sort of changed your direction and your created your interest for law. It also had a similar impact on me because I read it and I wanted to move to the Cayman Islands, and because obviously that's where it was based. I then met my wife, and 9 months after meeting her, we moved to the Cayman Islands. And the movie, The Firm, was being shown on the plane on the way there with Tom Cruise. So I just felt at that point it was meant to be. So I've also got myself a little Firm story, but so it's good to hear. But one thing that you mentioned there about law and your sort of your background in it and your studying of it is something that I often share with students as well. Is that a degree in law, and then even if you practice in law for a little bit, it can really be an introduction to a different part of a career. You know, it can be or a different path. So it doesn't have to be if you study law and you practice in law, it doesn't mean you will always be a lawyer forever, because it is such it is a degree or a profession that oversees so many things. And just listening to you there, you've become over time a project running expert, a director of projects almost in many ways. So it's fantastic to see. I think in terms of it's interesting to hear your journey, and I'd like to get into that a little bit more. A quick question for you. You mentioned in the notes that you wrote to us very kindly that you really sort of got an upbringing and a life that's taken you to all corners of Nigeria. Do you think that your upbringing and the beginning of your career and certainly your upbringing, your family, you're obviously a great family man like myself. One of the reasons I moved here was to spend more time with my children and things like that. So do you think that your upbringing has really shaped the decisions that you've made in your career so far?
Wow. I never thought about that. Because nobody in my family was a lawyer before me. I was the first lawyer in my family. Most people took in those days, in the 80s, right? There's this most people in my family were disposed to science courses, engineers, pharmacists. We had 2 pharmacists. We had 2 engineers. We had most people didn't take the line of the arts. I think they were just looked down on it like arts are people who can't make cuts in math. But I wanted to be an economist because I've always. Oh yes, I remember. It wasn't. It has more to do with my education, right? Well, back in high school, I used to spend time in the library. There was this part of the library that had this was before the internet era. We didn't have internet. It was just books. You had to read, not Google or research. So there's this part of the internet where they had they called it Worldview, I think. So you had all these books on old as they were then on who is who, the richest people in the world, and Guinness Book of Records, things like that. So I remember I loved spending time in that part of the library, over and above the academic side of the library. So then I remember I read about this guy, it was in the early 90s, he was the Prince of Brunei, he was the richest man in the world. So I read about, he was the richest man in the world for multiple years. So each year I come back, he was still the richest man in the world. Then he was finally upturned by Bill Gates, early 90s. Then Bill Gates had gone public with Microsoft. So I started to read about, I wanted to become one of these guys, right? How to make money. So I remember then the librarian, an elderly guy, noticed that I spent a lot of time there. So he asked me, why am I always in that part of the library and sort of where the books are? I said, I want to be like, he laughed. I remember he told me, he said, listen, it's not hard to be a billionaire or to be rich. Just create what people want and you'll be rich. So you're spending time, you're wasting too much time here. Just go out there, find something people will need every day, create it and you'll be rich. So go back to your books. I've summarized this aisle for you. So just go back to your books. Somebody thinking, how to make money. I was maybe 15, 16, thinking, okay, so I need to follow a path that can lead me to where these guys were. Now, one of the things they had in common, where they were all had an economic or business degree in their portfolio. All these guys I read about. I thought to myself, okay, clearly I needed a degree in either business or economy or something that was facing the financial markets. And then clearly I had to know I had to build a business that can go public. So this was where I took my economy very seriously. I was very good in economics. I remember I got an award. I had 1 or 2 awards in school then in economics. So that was the path up until I read that book on the firm. And I thought, it's really nice. I don't remember it's been so long I read that book. I don't remember why it was so moving. Yes, I remember why now. There was a friend of mine then. His father was very, very, was an industrialist, very wealthy industrialist then. And I remember I read about his dad some place in the magazine where I read he was a lawyer and then went from law into economy. He became a lawyer first and did an economy degree then. And he said in that interview, I don't remember, at that time he was a bank chairman. He had other interests in other businesses, but he said that both degrees helped shape his business acumen. He could read through any contracts, understand any legal issues he had to deal with. Then he could decipher how to price those issues as a business person. So those two kind of sat together. So I told myself, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and get a legal degree. Then I'm going to get a business degree on top of that. Then I'm going to run the world.
Nice.
Now, at the time when I took this decision, right, both my parents were hale and hearty and in good stead. But when I got out of high school, I went to university. Both my parents became physically ill at the same time. So they both managing different health crises, and of course, it affected their financial capacity. I remember when I was talking to my dad, had promised me I was going to go to Harvard. They told me, listen, keep your grades up. That I promised you, I will. In fact, I remember when I was talking to him, he had gone to Harvard himself. He had gone to make some inquiries as to admissions. The governor of my state then was an ex-Harvard graduate. So he was going to give my dad, you need some of these references and somebody has to refer. So my dad was making inquiries. This was when I was in high school. I had no thought. I didn't know which university was which. That time I was still maybe coming out of my secondary school level. So, but he was that determined that I would fit into one of these Ivy League schools, and he would finance it then. But by the time I got into university age, he was very sick. He wasn't on top of his business game as he was before. So I had to settle for a local school. And I remember then I now had to, and in Nigeria, it's not like law is longer here. It was a 4-year course, then a year of law school. Later on, it became a 5-year course and a year. So it was 6 years of, as opposed to the 3-4 years I'd had to do if I went abroad. So that kind of impacted my plus. Spending that much time in school, after 5 years and then law school 6 years, I had the zest to run back into the second degree at that time wasn't there. I just wanted to use this degree that I'd gotten to do what best I could do with it. So, how did I get the temple is, I was having dinner with a friend of mine many years ago. He's an engineer. He's doing very well for himself now. I don't know. I hope he watches this. He's working in, I think, BG or offshore in some Arab country or now, doing very well for himself. So yeah, I dinner with him then. This was after I'd left law school, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I want to take a break from. I'd been in university, law school. I'm not taking a break. So we were talking about oil and gas transactions, and he was working in Ocean and Oil. This Ocean and Oil was the original company that merged into O&O, which is what you call Oando today. It was originally Ocean and Oil. Then they merged. When they went public, they became Oando, which was O&O, but it's called Oando. That's actually how the name was derived. So we were working in Ocean and Oil back then. So we were talking about, and it was close to the MD of the company. So we're talking about joint ventures, and I said no. What you're saying is not. We have to do this, that. So he was perplexed that I had knowledge of the workings of an oil and gas company because in those days oil and gas wasn't a common course in university. I think maybe 2 or 3 universities offered it in Nigeria, and I happened to be in one of them, luckily enough. So I had taken the course, so I was very good at it. It was my majors was in oil and gas. So.
But also, sorry to interrupt, John, but you've also got an interest in business, right? Clearly from a very young age, you've got that interest in business and how business operates. So yeah, I can understand why.
Exactly. So when I had that conversation with him, he was very impressed. Like, we're both young guys. He was a friend of mine. So he was like, you know what? I need to give your CV to either my MD or his wife. His MD was the MD of a company. His wife was a partner at Templars then. So at that time, I didn't have a CV. I didn't have a CV. So I didn't put one together. I just got out of school. I was just out of law school, literally out of law. I haven't got my results. So he said I should do the CV and give it to him, and then he'll give it to either the company where he works as a legal person, or to the wife as a partner. So I didn't have a CV. So I called a friend of mine, Nnamdi. Nnamdi is now a co-head of a very, very prosperous financial investment house in Nigeria. He is also one of the people that went to school, went to law, and then took a business path. Nnamdi is one of the top leading financial analysts in Nigeria today, and he's a lawyer. He went to the same school with me, went to law school, but then he went straight into banking. He's been in banking all his professional life. So I went to him and said, listen, mate, I need a CV. I haven't got one. so he gives me a CV, and I use his structure to drop my own, because I had no experience. I just got out of school. I just borrowed the language from him and just put together a CV and gave it to my friend. So he arranges an interview for me with his MD's wife. Because I remember they said the company didn't want to take I had no experience. I mean, I have to retain how fresh out of school I was. I finished law school maybe March. This was in April. So he said, okay, but you can give my CV to the firm where his wife works. So he gave it to her. Her name is Mina Okoloko. I hope she watches this. So she called me over, invited me over to their house. They had a party in their house. So I went to my friend to their house, and she told me, listen, are you sure you want to practice law, or you want to go into, into in-house? I said, no, well, I want to have some practice experience. I want to know how things work before I go in-house. That was my plan then. So okay. And she introduced me to the practice head of Templars then. I know she introduced me to two of the partners then. I had my interview. So I remember, this is, again, I keep introducing, I was fresh out of school, no experience. So I was introduced to the head of Templars then. I hope he watches this. Good afternoon, OG. If you're watching this, shout out to you. So OG interviews me and he's like, he just saw passion because I had no skill that I could sell. I gave my CV first to the head of litigation, Mr. Atake. Again, hi, Mr. Atake, if you're watching this. So Mr. Atake was the one who gave it to. This guy is, because when he interviewed me, I didn't fit into his department. I fitted perfectly into the oil and gas space. So I said, okay, you know what? The partner in charge of oil and gas is out of country. When he comes back, his name is Ogogo, OG. When he comes back, I will call you back for an interview. So he calls me back and said, okay, OG, I'll come and see him. So we go into OG's office. Then, I don't remember what I said, but I just think I wanted to work. It was clear that I wanted to work. So OG said, I remember this line. He said, okay, I hear you and I like what you're saying, but fortunately, we don't have enough space right now because Templars was a smaller firm back then. It wasn't as big as it is. It's a massive firm now. But we don't have enough space here. So I don't know. So I said to him, sir, I might be take off my jacket and go into the library and start working from whatever chair you give me. I said that to him and he said, okay, I should give him he now asked me to leave the office. Then he spoke to Wale, the head of the organization, and then he spoke and he said, okay, you know what? Come and start on the intern position. I think it was just the raw hunger.
Yeah.
I think I call it hunger then because I don't know what else to call it. Just hunger, and I was genuinely, I wanted to do this work. I wanted to learn. I wanted to know how to do this. And that passion, yes, passion. But that passion was, I think, I had no law school results because they hadn't published the results yet. I had no experience. I had not worked a day in my life as a lawyer. I had nothing to sell. I didn't go to an Ivy League school abroad. I went to a very good school in Nigeria. So it was just the passion, really, that was the selling point for that engagement at that point. So, as far as they were concerned, they had this passionate intern that they thought could do some work. So, fine, let's give him a chance.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember months. So, in that period when I was an intern, I started, chasing. Those days, the way law firms work those days, right? You weren't in any department as an intern. You had to work around departments. Some departments will put you to better use. Some would not. Some you just carry file and fetch coffee. Some you actually do some research work, some follow-up work with the associate or the associate working there. So, but either way, you learn something, right? Even if all you did was fetch coffee, you still learn something because by being in the room when deals are happening, you learn something. So, I say that to say most young lawyers want to get into the deal room straight from school, maybe because they had a very good Ivy League education, but it doesn't really work that way at the ground floor. There's a lot of humility training on the ground floor. You have to learn how to take instructions and take orders from whoever your superior was. You have to learn how, and your best learning experience then are tacit, secondary experience. You're learning through that. You're watching things happen. You're in a room in a conference call where tempers are high. You're seeing how partners are talking to the clients. So you're learning by observation. You're learning a lot. You have a lot of secondary, second-hand knowledge that you're gaining. That is extremely crucial, and you don't even know it's happening because before you know it, you start mimicking those behaviors you've seen your seniors do. You start responding the way they respond. You start to manage your temperament or your attitude. So a lot happens when you fetch coffee. Just fetching tea and coffee or getting crackers or running to the printer, print this document, print that document. So you may call it menial work, and it is menial in its own form by itself, but If you consider that that menial work buys you the ticket to stay in the room when these things are happening, then you find out it's a good price to pay. Mocking those beginnings you could be lucky to start up in a law firm as an associate or whatever, but I think that process is very, very critical. So, like I said, because I was an intern then, I had that 360. I wasn't in any department per se. I was in litigation. It was grinding. It was cruel because I had to get up in the morning to go to court, come out in court to join a conference call, finish conference call, and go prepare my court report, and then go review the document I was given to review by my. So you were tasked. You were tasked heavily, and you may whine about it, because I remember I whined about it because I thought, oh my God, this is a bit much. But in the long run, right? This is why when I was 4 years at the bar and I gave somebody my CV, they didn't believe it was my CV. All this architecture you're building, some of it is unintentional learning, some of it is accidental learning. Just happen to observe and learn. Then I published an article while I was still an intern. That article got carried by a national newspaper here. Was in the company. It's called This Day. I believe This Day is also they're also in South Africa. I think they have a South African subsidiary. I don't know. Anyway, the article carried in the national papers here. So, and that kind of gave the firm a good view about me then. So when my law school results came out, it was very bad. It was shockingly, it wasn't what I expected. I expected a very good result. I promised them a very good result. I thought I did well in the exams, but when it came out, it was very, very. I think I made a pass or something, and I was crushed. I thought that, wow, how could I? I thought I was very intelligent. So making that law school result was a very humbling period of my life. I thought to myself, wow. I mean, how do I explain this to anyone? And in Nigeria, those days, I don't know about now, they published law school results in the papers. So everybody knew your result. You couldn't say you got anything else that you didn't get. Everybody saw your result. I remember going to work that morning on a little hiding place, and it's published on Sunday. And published on a Sunday. So by Monday, everybody has seen everybody's results. So Monday I went to the office, and I was I was very harrowing experience. I thought to myself, like, wow, how am I going to make this? How am I going to convince these guys that I can really, because then Templars is a choice firm, right? So they select there's a very competitive entry requirement. So I was thinking, wow, I've lost it now, haven't I? I mean, so I remember thinking then I better start looking for a new job. Because I mean, with this law school results, I don't think these guys are going to keep me here after my internship. I'm going to probably have to look for a new job. But again, this is where gravitas carries you where academics count, right? Because they've seen my industry. This especially OG and my then boss Olu. They've seen my industry and they believe that you have what it takes. Yeah, law school didn't do you well, but they gave me a lot of shaking about that.
Probably still now.
We're just hazing you. Oh no! I got hazed majorly. I got hazed especially by Mr. Take. Mr. Take was the first partner that I engaged with in Templars. So he always went about telling people, listen, I promised him a first class, and here I am. And he had a good laugh about it, but he was just good-natured ribbing, right? Because he later told me, listen, I'm just ribbing you. You know I'm not ribbing you, right? I also went through the same thing. So, and the culture was there those days. It was if you couldn't take the heat, then you don't. And law firms there, I don't know if it's the same now for a new lawyer coming into the practice. But then there was a culture. There was even hazing a young intern was part of the culture. I mean, they knew you were intelligent, but your report is saying something different. But they gave you a bit of hazing. Anyway, so after then they told me, listen, relax. We've seen what you can do. You published an article. We've seen some of your work. So we're not judging you based on what the law school result says. We're gonna retain you after your internship. So after my law school result came out and it was far below expectations, I got a major hazing in the work of Monday. But at the end of the day, they were like, listen, the partners called me and they listen, we've seen what you can do. You have industry. We need you to work hard. Put your head down. Work hard. You can make it. So they basically kept me on. To my surprise, because I thought that that was the end. So I'm saying all this to say because I know that people out there it is a lot of dependence on academic performance. And it's important. Some companies, if you don't have a such and such degree, they're not going to even consider you for an interview. So I know it's important, but what I'm trying to say is that it's not always the dead or end of the road you think it is. So if you're out there and you maybe your results aren't the best you thought they were, don't change your plans long term because of that.
Yeah.
I almost did. I almost thought, you know what, I can't make it. I'm going for, a bank job or something. I can't. But, because the partners there were able to overlook the academic side and say, this guy actually has something to offer. You may not always get that opportunity. Some firms are very academically inclined. They want only the first class or top of the class. Some firms are able to have an interview and some firms have that, some senior will have that. They can pick out that guy or that lady. Watch out for that guy. So in my days, we had those kind of firms. I don't know about now. I don't know if everything's academically, because there's a lot of competition now in the marketplace, right? You have all this, more people going to Ivy League schools, churning out better lawyers and maybe churning out those days. You have more of them with dual qualifications, Nigeria and elsewhere. So the competition may be high now. So I don't know if academics is going to play a part when I played then. But in my day, I was blessed to have senior partners who could say, "You're a smart guy. I'm going to keep you," even though your academics doesn't say differently. Unfortunately for me, I didn't prove them wrong, which meant they made a good call in the beginning, right? So that was one of the stumbling blocks I had to overcome. And secondly, I think personally speaking, that humbling experience was necessary, because I used to be very intellectually arrogant then. I thought I was smart. I believed I was smart, and I wasn't very modest about it. so when the law school result came out the way it was, I had provided a lot of canon fodder for those who would haze me in the office, because I had this high horse I used to stroll about on. So when it came out with a pass, obviously they went in for the kill. They went in for blood, and I can't blame them. Looking back now in that time, I would have probably done the same thing to me they did it to me, because I was being intellectually arrogant. In a way, I think it could have. It wasn't. I thought I was just being confident. So that confident and cocky, that line is where you don't know when you cross it. But when something like that happens to you, it kind of brings you down a peg or two. So you begin to become more grounded. And that time I needed that, to be honest, because I now had something to prove, right? I had to prove something to these guys that I'm that lawyer that they thought I was that guy who came here for an interview 6 months ago. I'm still that guy. So maybe in a way, I can say that gave me a chip on my shoulder, or maybe gave me a higher drive to succeed than I had before. If I come out with the first class, and I believe that, listen, I've already proven that I'm smart. I don't need to prove it but coming out with a pass gave me the reverse motivation to succeed and show that I knew a lot of things that I could do. Because after that time, I gave myself to the work. I became really, really determined about this work. And fortunately for me then, my boss then, Olumi Dakpata, who is actually running for governorship now, and I hope he wins. Olumi Dakpata was one of those who were intellectually simulated. So I wasn't spared any. He suffered no fools to live. The kind of partner he was, and at that time I thought it was harsh, but now I'm really happy. I'm fortunate for that. Olu, if you're watching this, thank you. Shout out. I hope you win. And I hope you win your governorship race. At that time I thought it was harsh because he was extremely demanding. And I thought, I'm just 2 years at the bar. No, you're not just 2 years, but you can do this. So putting that kind of weight, right, or responsibility of deliverable on you then, and having you deliver on some, maybe you fail some and deliver some, you become a better lawyer than you'd have been if you had to slow crawl. It's damaging. It's like going to the gym, right? It's when I'll tell you, start small weights, then upscale. Now, when I was in the firm itself was young then. It was in 03, 04. The firm was about less than 10 years old, and they were carrying heavy transactions already. So you really had to come in on deep end. There wasn't any space to that line of thought you wanted to. I had to come in on deep end. So there's a lot of you had senior associates that could guide. You had a lot of senior associates then that could guide you around, but you had to swim us. It was a swim or swim environment. If you didn't swim, you got swallowed up by the tide. And I was damning not to get swallowed by a tide because I already had that academic cross hanging over my shoulder, and I was damning not to let that define me. So it was now about hard work, innovation, intelligentsia, and I did a lot of that. I worked with Olu for 4 years, and we did a lot of nice deals. Then I thought to myself, okay, I need to go back to the in-house plan I made for myself, which was go back, because I always thought to myself that this practice was just was a means to go back into a business environment, in the business world. But then I was getting more offers. Yes. This was the turning point in Templars. I got a call one day from a headhunter. I don't know how he found my number. I was working something. He called me like, "Listen, you're so and so." I said, "Yeah." He could meet me for drinks after work. I said, "Okay, sure." Met him over and said, "Listen, somebody passed me your CV. I think you can." At that time, he was recruiting for Chevron, oil and gas, and other law firms at the same time. And I wanted the Chevron job, because Chevron job obviously meant more money, more opportunities. But he said to me, "Listen, I've spoken to you, you're a smart lawyer, you got some things on your CV, but you could do with a bit more heavy lifting. I have 2 mandates right now. One is Chevron, which I know you're interested in. One is another law firm. Why don't you go to this other law firm and do more oil and gas lifting, as opposed to right now you're commercial, you're very broad based. Maybe if you toe the line of this oil and gas practice, strictly so-called, in a few years you come in at Chevron at a higher level or whatever than you would come in today. So in other words, if you take this job today, in 10 years time, if I were able to bifurcate you into 2 Johns, John that went into a deeper practice of oil and gas, and this one going to Chevron, one day this guy will come in and be your boss, because you have more experience than you. You have only solo experience in-house. So, and it was very convincing. I remember then thinking to myself, okay, fine, set it up. Then that's when I went to meet with the Denton's partners then. So at that time I thought to myself, this is the right move. I had so much doubt. I thought, shouldn't I just be going in-house now and then build some operations, finance experience, then I can use that to, launch into the world, But I met with the folks at my senior partners then at Denton's, where they good. This is where I said to you, I gave her my CV, and she said to me, "This CV doesn't look like your CV. You're a young person, and this CV looks very bulky. She said to me, could we just pick out your actual deals?" In fact, she was wary. She had done a lot of interviews that period. So she was like, "Listen, I'm interview fatigued. I'm meeting people with all kind of funny deals." Yeah, and then, but in fairness to her, right? When you get a CV of somebody who gives you, but because you can't defend transactions, you just know the bogus CV, right? So, and you don't, a lot of those. So she was really like, "Listen, just let me just fine tune your deal. Let's do that." I said, "No." I said, "Okay, pick any transaction. Let's discuss." We speak to one transaction, talk. We spoke. Speak to another one, another one. And it's okay. Sit down. Wait here a while. She sat me down. She goes and calls the senior partner, managing partner, Shola Adekwetu. She like, "Good afternoon, Adekwetu, you're here watching this. Hello." Then they came into the room together. Now 2 senior partners interviewing this 4 years at the old guy. And started all over again. So they drilled down to ensure that this was actually his CV. And it's okay, fine. You now have to do with the move. At this time, I still wasn't sure I was making the right move. So I was still going for other interviews in other oil companies. I thought to myself, I want to get into oil company. I want to get into work, and this law thing is tiresome. I want to get into other spaces. So I've spoken to Ando then. I've spoken to a couple of other people then, and I wanted to just make the money. I wasn't interested in getting more experience level. But for many reasons, different reasons, they all fell through. So I ended up working at Akers Denton. Now, the first few years I was there were because then I was a bit more senior, so I had people under me than I had before. So, and again, I was now core oil and gas for a few years. I didn't have that. I couldn't go to court I didn't want to anyway. In Templars then I was more secular. I could do this, that, and the other. In Akers I was very focused on oil and gas transactions. I was sat under an oil and gas partner. I was there and I worked under her for a few years with my mentor then. So then I grew my oil and gas expertise, grew it until I now started doing oil and gas related work, the finances, the EPCs, Then again, after a while, you, of course, I mean, there's no one trick pony in any big firm. You have to do more than what that core department focuses on. So even if you're in energy, you still do finance, you did a lot of other work. So I did that, and it was at this time around, I think I put in more time, even more so than I thought I did when I was at Templars, because I was hungrier now. I wanted to make a name for myself. So as the deals kept coming larger and larger and kept getting done, each of those deals will take you, and each deal you do, each major deal, you expand your social capital. You meet the who's who, because you're not working with industry captains, industry leaders on their transactions. So you're expanding your experience, but you're also expanding your social capital. More people know you. People are not knowing about you because they meet you in the negotiation room. You've haggled with them on deals. You structure deals with their lawyers. You work with them for or against them. So without knowing it, you're building your social capital. So you got to the point where I was saturated. I think I was also a bit fatigued because after like 12 years of doing that, you get a bit tired. That's 16 years cumulative. I was now only like, listen, I'm tired. If I have to keep doing this, it has to be on my terms. So I can't stay here. When I left, I put in my resignation for Acres because when I left Acres, I wasn't trying to get another job. I wanted to do what I'm doing now then. It was 16 years at the bar. I thought I was ripe to go into my own field. Then somebody called me and said, oh, this company is looking for a general counsel. They have somebody in mind, but they also, I would like to put in your name. Then it turned out to be Amni. The general counsel, the director of legal was Chidi Moma, who's head of NMPC Legal now. Shout out Chidi, if you can hear this. Hi. So I got in-house. I worked with him for about 4 years. That was when I had this overall experience of having this, that, and the other. That was my first in-house role, and I've always wanted to have that in-house and practice experience fused together. I thought that was a combined, very good lawyer. If you've always been in-house, if you've always been in practice, I think something is missing from both sides of the table. But if you fuse them together, I think.
I tell you what, it does make, John, that combination of experience does make a very good consultant and consultancy. Like when you're working for yourself and you've got those two experiences, both the practice being a partner, running deals, running teams, and then seeing it from the client side as well. It does give you that really good combination.
Because in practice, right, you're the client to the external lawyer. So you're sat where your clients used to sit. So you now get the feedback from the lawyer as, although I find that practice lawyers who become in-house lawyers tend to be more critical of external lawyers' work because you've been there before. You can tell this is shoddy. You can tell this is shoddy work. This is well done. But both shoddy and well done work, quote unquote, could actually address the brief, right? But you have done this better if you were in this guy's position. But then secondly, you're the client because you're also seeing the project. You know what you want to achieve, the business objective. The business objective is the overarching reason why we're doing this or that. Why are we borrowing $200 million? Why are we building this structure? That overarching objective with all the nuances of reasoning that the lawyer doesn't know because they're not in the room when it was decided upon. You know the reason why this has to be done before that. So you're now able to manage external counsel better because first of all, you've been an external counsel. You know that they are responding to a brief that you gave them to do. But you're also in the room with your company. So you know what the company is trying to achieve. You're able to prioritize different levels of that same brief. So it gives you that rounded experience, which is why I always thought it was a good idea to go in-house before you launch out. So, and then also I was close to the management at Amni. So I was able to see firsthand why we're doing what we're doing about anything we're doing. So I saw the issues from a very real perspective. I knew what the objective was, commercial, mid-term, long-term goals, how to draw them up, how to meet them, how to learn from failures. Because that was the first time I heard of something called the lessons learned report. I never heard about that when I was in practice. It was something that we used to do every time or after we went through a project to find out where we went wrong and what we could have done better next time. Of course, practice has a different mechanism for that, but I really find that tool to be very useful because the failures become part of your armory, right? Most people don't talk about their failures; they won't talk about their successes, right?
No, that's a really important thing is to talk about the failures as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and those failures teach more than the successes taught you, actually, if you think about it, because those failures are the best experience you've ever had, and you should never have again. Because if you have them twice, then something is wrong. You shouldn't have them once. So those kind of things you learn in practice.
In your case there, John, look at how the disappointment of your law results shaped you as a person.
Yeah.
Obviously, you had that fighting spirit and that passion to work already, but actually it probably in many ways came at the right time, that sort of humbling experience. So yeah, that it can shape you to be even better.
I was competing with people who I thought were better prepared for the marketplace. They went to better schools, they had better degrees. So I thought to myself, yeah, I'm with this. But that can either be a chip on your shoulder or a motivational force in your life, depending on what kind of person you buy. I advise that most people change their career plans because of a result they had in school. They feel, no, don't do that. Keep at it. If your current opportunities may not work out, but some opportunities down the line will work out if you maintain the passion. If you realize the fuel that fuels your destiny, that passion. Because some people change course and left and became, did something else. And then one of the best advice I've gotten was that gentleman I spoke to the headhunter I spoke to at Templars. I don't remember his name, it's so long ago. But in a way, I was glad I took his advice because I didn't want to. I felt I wanted to just go straight in-house, but that was the best thing I ever did. Because when I went in-house, eventually, it was a different experience entirely. I had so much to offer the company than I would have had if I just learned from the company. Because the company can't teach you, they can only teach you their business. They can't really teach you your legal experience. They can teach you the company's business. So if you leave practice too early and join a mining company, you know mining. You know only mining. You wouldn't know anything about mining. If you left too early and joined the shipping company, you know shipping. But if you spend a long time, you can bring far more computer experience to that same role than you would. So, long story short, it's best to have some training, grounded. You can tell yourself, you know when you're ready. If you want to move, you know, okay, I'm ready. And that's something nobody can tell you. You know yourself. You know, and it's not about years. There's a number of years.
Brings me on quite nicely to a question. There's a couple of questions I wanted to sort of almost combine into one, if I may. You mentioned at the very beginning about you being very much a family-orientated man, and I know in the notes that you wrote for us before that you mentioned how supportive your wife has been in some of your, shall we say, maybe others would see it as a risk, but you obviously are, calculated risks. Would you, in all of your journey so far, which you've shared with us, which is amazing, and there's literally so many, for any listeners out here looking to pick up on the successes in their career, there's literally a list of things that I've just noted that you've done and challenges you've come over and got over. But would you say that clearly your wife, what you wrote there in those notes, very similar to my wife, very just right behind me, will back me, will look into my eyes and go, no, you've got this. You've got my backing. Would you say that the combination of the obviously the wonderful support network that you've built and then would that and I want to sort of combine that, if I may, with, is there one standout moment that you can think of to share with us of something that's really shaped your career? You mentioned about in the notes, you mentioned about the Chevron downstream acquisition that maybe you'd like to share with us, but maybe if you could just touch on sort of the support network first and then maybe touch on that as well.
Okay, fantastic question. Okay, first of all, my wife she's amazing. I apologize for the diversion, but I'm a Christian, for instance, right? And the Bible, it says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." I never knew what that meant. I've heard it I heard it all while I was growing up, but I never really thought. I thought it was something that is said in the Bible. When I got married, I found out what that meant in real time, because my wife is she's my greatest in movies, in the more movies, say she's a consigliere, right? She's the right hand man of the boss, and she's my thought filter. She's calmer. First of all, I'm very I'm very, I won't say belligerent. I tend to be the more aggressive type of lawyer, right? And I've always been able to hone that into passion for my clients. So they like, if a client wants to go into a fight, they call me. When I'm going to do a deal that is going to be rocky, they call me. They know that this, but if they want to make peace, they don't call me. They call someone like my wife, if she was a lawyer. So I use that as a mental filtration, because sometimes I have this. She's very supportive of my career, even when decisions were very risky to take. Most women would have said, please. Case in point, right? When I was saturated at Denton's, I was really tired. I was obviously unhappy. I didn't know how unhappy I was, because you can manage it well at the office, but your wife sees when you come home that you're not doing well mentally. You're not in a nice headspace. So I remember then when I thought of leaving, we had it was 2018. We had a 9-month-old baby. My second baby was 9 months. My second child was then 9 months. So it was a baby. So of course the requirement of a baby is very massive. You have to make sure you have your health package in place. You have So that was not the right time to be leaving a stable job. But I was so unhappy, and I told her, listen, I'm thinking of quitting. So, and I said that to her because I wanted her to say, oh no, we can't quit. You can't quit because this, that. So I expected that to be my pushback, so I get a mental reset. But she said, listen, if you're not happy about it, you should leave, because you're not doing well mentally. You're not happy anymore. You feel as if you feel like you've overdone your time in practice, and you're punishing yourself for it, as opposed to just taking the decision to leave. And when she said that, something just lifted. I didn't have a second job. I didn't have an offer on the table. I just thought we'll figure it out together. Don't worry, we'll figure it out together. So that was that's still a very, I think about it now. Do you know, think about it now, I feel bad, because if somebody called me and said, listen, I'm going to leave I was like, listen, sit your bum down and do your work. You got a baby. And I said the opposite to that person on the phone. So I feel kind of like, because I think, listen, if Rob called me and said, John, I'm thinking about, I'm a partner at Norton Rose. I'm thinking of quitting because I don't feel fulfilled anymore. And I'm like, mate, you just had a baby, yeah? Your baby's not even 1 year old yet. Listen, stop that. You'll be fine. Just have coffee and sleep well, you'll be fine. But I got and that really gave me that, okay, we're together in this, right? So you're not going to be very upset because I know there's going to be rocky roads ahead when you leave and just jump into the market. So that will be fine. That faith she had.
I wasn't. Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, it
was such a moral boost.
That faith that she has in you, and the person who knows you the best in the world, who looks at you every day and sees you, that might have been. And again, obviously, I don't know, but that might have been a pivotal moment in your career.
It was.
That might be one of the biggest moments.
If she had said, no, don't do it, I wouldn't have done it. And I sat back and...
But she saw you, she saw your eyes, she saw your face, and she just went, yeah, and she's backed you. And she also has that belief in you, and that is undeniable. That faith in you is brilliant. I mean, shout out to your wife. She's an amazing woman. But
baby, I'm sorry, watching this.
It's amazing.
My God, I can do this.
She trusts you. She trusts you to make those decisions. And I've been in similar situations with my wife in terms of we've moved around the world and with my business and things like that. And I've been low, very low as well in times. And she's just looked at me and she's given me that undeniable support. And we're clearly very lucky. But your wife, that could be such a big moment in your career.
It was. Your home support system is very critical. You hardly meet anybody on top of their game, either in the bank, either in business or whatever practice, that doesn't have a wife who was instrumental to that rise. But those people had their down moments before they got to that position. Somebody somewhere was pushing them. Don't worry, keep going. So, and that it's best if it's your partner. If you're a woman, it's best if it's your husband, because these are people you relate with intimately the most. So if they believe, even if you don't believe and they believe, you can draw from their belief that, because when you said that to me, honestly speaking, I wasn't ready for that answer. I was ready for the normal answer, like, John, we just had the baby. And I was waiting for her to say that so I can tell myself, wake up. But she went the other, and I was, that gave me a moral boost. Then secondly, my wife is also my filter process, because I understand. Before I got married, I thought everybody saw. I thought this was black to everybody, right? This is black to me. Before I got married, I thought everybody saw it. But when I got married, I found that it's possible that this can be seen in this shade of light as indigo. But in your mind, you're convinced this is black. So and then after a few conversations with her about this or that and the other, I saw her. She was extremely discerning, in a way that she gives a different opinion, a different light of opinion on things that I had convinced myself that this is how only one way it could go, or this is only this. So after a while, I learned to trust her judgment quietly. So until today, I still ask her. Sometimes I filter my issues, not legal issues, because she's not a lawyer, she's a business consultant, but judgments. This is what I think about this. What do you think?
Yeah. No, me too. I do the same thing.
Sound judgment.
Absolutely. I do the same thing. I think, one of the things that I've learned, and obviously we're in a similar position. We're talking about our very supportive wives. We've both got children, and business owners as well. And I think that puts us in a very similar space. And I think one of the things that with my wife, she doesn't do what I do, but whenever I've had a problem or I've had a success, she's the first person I've shared it with. If it's a problem, at the beginning of running a business, when you've got cash flows really tight and things like that, and you're worried about money, and I shared it with her. There was no surprises. I didn't hide anything from her. And that gave her the faith in me as I was building and growing. And I'm sure your wife has been the same. And I think that's really important to have. John, I've got a final question for you, but because I know that you've got to get on with your day and obviously, but I do feel like I could talk to you forever, to be honest. I think we've only just scratched the surface, but it's a bit of a sort of holistic, almost open question. But from you as a business leader, as a business owner, and as a prominent lawyer in the wider African market, having had global experience as well. What do you see as the major, if I can just put it into two parts, the major changes you see coming for the legal services space, and also for the Nigerian economy, given your interest in economics as well and the markets? What do you think's coming for law, and what do you think's coming for Nigeria?
Okay, good question. I think the legal space in Nigeria is where, if in my mind, where the banking space was about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the bank in Nigeria we had this new central bank governor who came with a very reformative view of the market and forced the banks to increase their capital thresholds. When the market became more competitive, the banks had to merge or die. That was what happened in the banking sector then. Some banks stood individually, very strong banks stood. Other small banks had to merge together, amalgamate, and turn to a bank who could stand. Some died. Same thing is going to happen to the legal markets. We're having this globalization that's going to compound the market so much that a lawyer can sit. We are yearning here for African lawyers are yearning to have better grip on transactions in the market of their own space. What you find now happening is deals done here by English law firms or foreign law firms with a Nigerian law firm. Nigerian transactions done by Nigerian law firm. What you see the lawyer trying to agitate for is to have a better grip on those deals. So you see some law firms, for instance, Nigerian law firms, setting up UK offices, trying to globalize their brand, right? Some Nigerian firms, Templars, for instance, where I used to work, they set up a Ghanaian office, and they're expanding rapidly in that market space. So there's that expand or die in the market space right now, right? The new crop of business leaders or legal leaders in the next generation are going to be massively big in this part of the world. Because if you go back to English firms, Clifford Chance, Linklaters, National, they are very old firms. They're very old establishments. Over the course of their years, they probably had to merge, recapitalize, or amalgamate to stay alive over to stay this long as they've been. Same thing happening here in Nigeria now. We've had firms who have, and that wasn't the case. Those days, everybody wants to be a big fish in a small pond. That you can't survive that way anymore. The deals are getting fewer and fewer in between, with the stronger hands grabbing them, right? So you have to either amalgamate, you have to grow, or you have to get subsumed into a growth potential. You have to also diversify for the future. Transactions now are getting more and more futuristic. You now have fintech, you now have AI, you now have those things that we didn't have in my time. So you're going to have in more digital space, a lot of newfound, well, not newfound land, but newfound businesses are going to come up. So expertise has to expand beyond what you know to be the norm of what you did as a lawyer. You have to come a time, the biggest billionaires will be fintech. Not necessarily banking as we do it today. The biggest billionaires will be people who understand technology, right? Now, laws are evolving around those event matters, and those laws keep evolving. So getting ahead of those markets and getting a grip of those markets is also going to be advantageous. And finally, because we're in Africa, right? You're always going to have solid space in the infrastructure markets. I don't think Africa is going to ever be saturated with infrastructure. You're always going to play well in that space. So if you're playing in that space, you're always going to find something to do. So this is how I see the future growing, and this is why it's going to be very interesting times ahead. Some firms will make it, some won't. Some will merge and make it, some will merge and not make it, because they're going to have cultural clashes that will be defining their success. But by and large, it's a very interesting future I see ahead of it.
And what impact do you think AI is going to have on the services that for instance, you provide? Do you think like some do, like it will level the playing field somewhat with smaller firms being able to compete with bigger firms?
Well, I see that. I'll borrow the English practice, right? A lot of firms in England have set up several other departments that are meant to either they're meant to provide. They've gotten ahead of they're trying to be proactive here. How they deal with AI. The original question was: is AI able to replace legal services? Answer is no, at least not in the immediate term. AI is like an advanced Google search engine at this point. But come a time, you see some law firms already creating hubs within their firms to try and get ahead of the AI game, to try and understand or even use the AI as a legal tool in their as part of their legal tool processes. Just not using encyclopedias and law reports and case laws. You can also employ AI as a tool. Now that's going to happen for a while, until I don't think that it's going to ever replace lawyers, because most clients ask you for a judgment, right? They're not looking for the nitty-gritty. A client will use AI themselves, but they need judgment. They need somebody to exercise judgment on their behalf. They need somebody to play scenarios that is beyond black and white. The scenarios are played in the gray area. That's why. So sound legal services will always be in place. Now, how those legal services employ technological advancement into their practice as a whole is going to set them apart from the other practices. Think, for instance, 20, 30 years ago, those firms that were able to launch something as simple as internet or laptops, as opposed to typewriting and handwriting and book research, were able to advance quickly beyond the law. I imagine maybe I go back maybe 30, 40 years when internet wasn't so popular or wasn't even available. Firms probably did research by going through hardcovers of books to get case laws and law reports and draft the templates. I can imagine the first firm then that had internet in their office and had a laptop. I imagine they stood out. I imagine they stood like, wow, this firm has internet. I can imagine in 40 years ago, right? So,
it was kind of like, we've got the internet. It would have been...
Exactly. So, so today you have them that said, oh, we have a team that employs AI in there. So I guess it's the same thing now. Some people are getting ahead of the curve, and other people will catch up later on. But I don't think we're going to be here in 100 years, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've spoken to many lawyers, senior lawyers, especially over the last 12 to 18 months about the advent of AGI and AI in particular. And what I've tried to appease many with is the fact that the tools that they already use, some of the software that they already use, will already employ artificial intelligence in many ways. I mean, you and I both use Google Chrome. That employs a lot of AI. So we'll be using it anyway.
Already.
And for me, it's always a case of every industry always changes. Law perhaps changes a bit slower than some. I mean, you mentioned banking there, which is always a bit like turning an oil tanker, isn't it, into the way it changes. But this technology that comes on board really just, people just need to embrace it and learn to utilize it as well. And finally, just while I've got you there as well, I mean, how are things in Nigeria from an economic perspective? I mean, we down here read that, obviously Nigeria is the biggest economy in Africa, and it always looks like it's, massive business, oil business, banking, so much going on. I mean, Lagos obviously is a humongous centre. How is it? It always seems very exciting to me.
Well, we're definitely living in exciting times in Nigeria. We just had an election last year that brought a new government in power. They've been in power about 9 months now. So that they are and the economy was a bit of a mess when they took over. They've had to deal with a lot of backlog of debts, infrastructure deficits, security, inflation. And I think a lot of the handover from the last government are being dealt with in this government, and it's kind of it's like you get a new job and the handover pile is high on the desk of your predecessor, so you're having to sift through that mass to get to your own deliverables and before you can begin to see how people see. So that's a gift and a curse to the government at the same time. It's a gift because it's a curse because the polity isn't going to experience the long-term plans you have in the immediate, right? We just had a petroleum sector deregulated, which means we're buying PMS and AGO at the pump and the comparative price to international prices, which we've never done before. We've always been shielded from those prices by subsidy, right? The government had the political courage to take up that subsidy, which is long overdue. Remove the courage. So, of course, that has immediate social implications because you're not exposing people to higher cost of living. Then you're trying to do all that while you're trying to rebuild the economy, make it more attractive for external investors to come and invest, while you're also tackling security issues because the security in Nigeria, right? The agro sector is largely in the northern part of the country. That's the food battle of the country, where they grow a lot of the fruit crops. And that's also, unfortunately, where you have the highest level of insecurity with bandits and whatnot. So that insecurity affects the agro sector. The agro sector is not able to produce the food basket, and that causes food inflation. And food inflation dovetails into the general parity of the policy. So everybody's feeling everything being more expensive than they usually would have been. So you have that multiple level of problem that the government is trying to save through. And they are doing their best. They've been trying to, and this is something they have to work at simultaneously. You can't ignore security while facing economy. You can't ignore economy while facing inflation. So the government is very busy. Now as time goes on, I bet as you sift through this pile of deliverables, I imagine it will, because whenever the government opens up a new sector, opens up a new area of work, it creates projects, it creates investment, it creates investments, projects drive transactions. So you become busier as a lawyer when they get more. If they're going to develop that, for instance, we're working a lot on our railway network in Nigeria. Some states are beginning to develop their metro lines. We're going from non-renewable to renewable energy. So that creates so different spaces are opening up to deal with the issues you're having in the economy, and that creates opportunities. So which is why I said in my prior answer, you have to be forward thinking. If you play we have a massive infrastructure deficit in Nigeria. So we're never going to be saturated with deals like that. They're going to always have deals in those spaces. new areas like the green energy space is opening up in Nigeria, renewable energy is opening up in Nigeria, and so as time goes on, the government gets as they go back from it's like a bank account being from red back to green and back to blue, right? So they're trying to move the economy from red to blue, and that creates a whole range of opportunities and transactional sectors. But it's going to get a while, and I hope they get it right. They have a good team in place. No, it's not going to be easy they're not having it easy right now because people are there's a lot of things complaining about right now as a Nigerian. But you can see the government is doing their best to address those things, right? So you know that it takes some time, but they usually get it sorted out, hopefully.
Brilliant, John. I mean, honestly, I'm being told I've got 1 minute left anyway, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. But look, this has been such an enjoyable conversation, John. Thank you so much for your time. This is definitely chapter 1. I'm going to ask you in the very near future if we could do it again, please. I mean, honestly, thank you, because you've got such a fascinating story. So for now, I'm going to sign off and say thank you so much, John. You really are a powerhouse. I've wanted you on the podcast for so long. It's so great to hear a bit more about your story, and thank you very much.